Let's begin here, because too many believe that speaking makes you stronger. They think every dream must be told, every pain explained, every plan announced. But each time you speak too soon, something sacred slips away. Your story begins to feel smaller. Your vision feels lighter than it really is. And you start to depend on the reaction of others instead of your own inner ground. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength. It is the container that holds your transformation before it is ready for the world to see. And in that silence, the soul prepares itself for the next stage of life. Before I continue, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if reflections like this resonate, don't forget to like and subscribe. We live in a culture that urges constant expression. Social networks, endless conversations, even well-meaning friends push us to explain ourselves. But Jung observed that the more you explain yourself, the less you remain yourself. He meant that the core of your being is not meant to be handed out like loose change. Some parts of your soul must remain within, growing in their own rhythm, shielded from misunderstanding and misuse. Think of the contrast. A person who tells every step of their process soon feels drained, fragile, and uncertain. Their growth becomes a performance measured by applause or silence from others. But a person who carries their process quietly is different. Their steps may be invisible, but their presence grows more solid each day. You can feel the difference in the way they walk into a room. Their calmness is not explained, it is lived. Jung called this the tension between persona and self. The persona is the mask we show to others, eager for approval and recognition. The self is deeper hidden and not always ready for the crowd. When we speak too quickly, we feed the mask and starve the core. When we wait, when we keep some things within, we give the self room to grow. This is the setup for the journey ahead. In the coming reflections, we will walk step by step through why silence is not emptiness, but fertile ground. Why it protects you from the shallow gaze of others. And why the most powerful changes in your life are those that ripen without witnesses. Silence, wisely chosen, becomes your first act of true strength. There comes a moment in every life when silence feels heavy and words seem to promise relief. Someone asks how you are, and you begin to explain. You tell them what has happened, what you fear, and what you hope will change. For a brief instant, it feels lighter, as if the burden has been shared. Yet soon after, something else creeps in, a sense that you gave away more than you intended. Your story, which once felt deep and strong, now feels smaller in their hands. This is the first fracture of the soul, the unconscious habit of scattering one's strength by explaining too much. Jung observed that we often believe telling our story will heal it, when in truth, it can make the wound larger. For every sacred moment you reveal without care, a piece of its power slips away. Not because the listener is cruel, but because what belongs to your inner life is not meant to be held by every passing ear. Think of how often people pour out their struggles, hoping to be understood. They speak to friends, to family, sometimes even to strangers online. At first, it feels like connection. But later, when the response does not match the depth of their experience, disappointment sets in. They feel more alone, not less. And with that disappointment comes doubt. Perhaps my feelings were not important. Perhaps my vision was foolish. Perhaps I was wrong to dream at all. The danger is subtle. By explaining everything, you begin to measure your own truth by how others receive it. A dream that is met with silence feels weaker. A confession that earns quick advice feels dismissed. Slowly, your own compass turns outward instead of inward. This is how the fracture deepens. The need for understanding replaces the need for inner clarity. Jung taught that every soul has a private rhythm, a space where transformation ripens in secret. But when you speak too soon, before the fruit is ready, you expose it to cold winds. The sweetness has not yet formed, and so it spoils. This is why so many people feel emptier. After speaking their hearts, they have opened the door before the house was built. They wanted shelter from another, but instead, they gave away the fire that should have warmed them from within. Consider the contrast. A woman who rushes to explain her pain again and again soon feels exhausted. She has repeated the same story so many times that it begins to lose its meaning. What once was an inner journey becomes a performance shaped by how others respond. But another woman chooses silence. She holds her struggle close, not in fear, but in respect. She lets the fire burn quietly, allowing it to forge strength inside her. To the outside world, little may be visible. Yet when she emerges, she does so with a presence that needs no explanation. This difference is not about speaking versus never speaking. It is about timing, discernment, and intention. Words can heal, but only when chosen with care. Words spoken too quickly to the wrong ears become a leak in the vessel of the soul. Jung compared such leaks to the shadow's hunger. The shadow thrives when we give away our center to gain sympathy, when we hand out pieces of ourselves in the hope of being validated. Each time we do, we become more fragile, more dependent on the approval of others. The first fracture, then, is not the wound itself. It is the act of exposing the wound to those who cannot hold it. Many of us learned this lesson the hard way. We trusted too quickly, hoping for comfort, only to discover that our words were misunderstood, dismissed, or even used against us. The pain doubled once from the original struggle, and once again from the betrayal of sharing it. Jung would say, this is the moment when persona and self collide. The persona longs to be admired, to be pitied, to be seen. It believes that recognition from others is proof of existence. But the self, that deeper core, does not need an audience. It needs space, quiet, and patience. When the persona speaks too soon, it exposes what the self was still nurturing. And in that exposure, the seed of transformation is robbed of its soil. Notice how much of modern life encourages this fracture. We are told to share our truth, to post every detail, to narrate our lives, as if the act of telling is equal to the act of living. But Jung warned that constant explanation weakens the soul. He reminded us that what is not spoken can grow stronger, while what is spoken, too often, loses its vitality. A sacred process cannot survive being made into entertainment. Perhaps you have felt this yourself. You told someone about a dream you carried in secret. At first, it glowed brightly in your words, but as soon as it left your lips, it seemed smaller. Their reaction, a shrug, a piece of shallowish advice, or even enthusiasm that felt forced, drained the vision of its intimacy. Suddenly, you wondered whether the dream was worth pursuing at all. That hesitation was not proof of the dream's weakness. It was proof that you exposed it before it was ready. This is the warning silence gives us. Not every thought belongs in the air. Not every struggle deserves an audience. Some must be held within, not to hide them, but to protect them until they are strong enough to stand on their own. Jung called this the brooding of the soul. Like a seed beneath the soil, unseen yet alive, it gathers strength in darkness before pushing into the light. So what is the hidden cost of always explaining yourself? It is the slow erosion of inner authority. Each time you measure your life by how it is received, you give away the power to define it for yourself. Each time you expect others to validate your path, you risk being turned aside by their misunderstanding. Over time, the constant telling fragments your sense of wholeness. The story of your life becomes scattered across many ears, each holding only a piece, while you are left feeling less complete than before. The truth is the deepest parts of you cannot be fully explained. They can only be lived. Your dreams, your struggles, your private awakenings, these are not meant to be made smaller through constant narration. They are meant to expand within you until they shape the way you walk, the way you choose, the way you carry yourself in silence. This is why the first fracture is so dangerous. It begins so innocently with a simple urge to share, but if left unchecked, it becomes a habit that weakens the soul. The constant telling becomes a craving for recognition, and recognition becomes the substitute for growth. At that point, you no longer live for your own becoming. You live for the reaction of others. Jung's insight was sharp. What you give away in words no longer belongs only to you. Once spoken, it is carried by others, interpreted, judged, forgotten, or distorted. And each time that happens, you lose a little of the sacred intimacy between yourself and your own process. Silence is not about hiding. It is about honoring what is not yet ready to be shared. So, when you feel the urge to explain, pause. Ask yourself, does this need to be spoken now, or does it need to be lived longer within me? Is this wound ready for light, or does it need more time in the dark soil of my heart? These questions are not about fear. They are about respect, respect for your own unfolding. The fracture can be healed, but only by learning to guard what matters most. When you resist the impulse to hand out your story, you begin to reclaim your center. When you learn that not every silence is emptiness, you start to feel the quiet strength that grows inside. And in that strength, you prepare yourself for the next stage, a stage where your life itself, not your words, carries the truth. This is where we pause in our journey. We have seen the first fracture, the hidden cost of explaining too much. In the next reflection, we will go deeper into the battle between persona and shadow, the inner tension that makes us so eager to be understood and so afraid of being unseen. We ended with the first fracture, the hidden cost of explaining too much. Now, the path takes us deeper into the quiet battlefield between two inner forces, the persona and the shadow. Every human life carries both. The persona is the mask you wear for the world, polished and shaped by the desire to be seen. The shadow is the neglected part of you, holding your insecurity, your hunger for validation, your fear of being invisible. Together, they create a tension that silently rules many lives. Most people do not notice this conflict because they are too busy trying to be recognized. A woman explains her choices again and again, hoping someone will finally approve. A man speaks loudly of his pain, hoping it will buy him compassion. The persona convinces them this is strength. Yet beneath the surface, the shadow feeds on every attempt. Each time you depend on applause, the shadow grows more restless. Each time you need others to confirm your worth, the shadow becomes hungrier still. Jung warned that this hunger is never satisfied. Recognition feels sweet at first, but it fades quickly. The next day, the shadow whispers again, explain more, show more, reveal more. In this way, the cycle repeats. You give away pieces of yourself, and yet the emptiness inside only deepens. This is how the persona and the shadow form a trap. What looks like self-expression becomes dependence. What feels like connection becomes captivity. Think of the contrast. A person who lives for recognition always feels fragile. Their mood rises and falls with the opinions of others. Praise becomes fuel. Silence becomes rejection. They must keep performing to keep the applause alive. But another person who has learned to walk without witnesses carries a different power. She does not need to explain, because her actions and her silence already speak. He does not crumble when misunderstood, because his worth is anchored in something deeper. This difference is not about confidence in the ordinary sense. It is about where the center of gravity is placed outside in the gaze of others, or inside in the quiet of the soul. The shadow thrives in the first case. Jung described it as the unseen double, carrying the weakness you refuse to face. When you cling to recognition, you are giving the shadow free rein. It becomes a puppet master, making you seek constant validation while hiding the fear that drives it. The persona plays along, smiling, explaining, justifying. But beneath the mask, the shadow is the one in control. We see this clearly in modern life. Social media has become a stage for the persona, while the shadow hides in the comment sections, feeding on every reaction. You tell yourself you are simply sharing your journey. But what if the truth is darker? What if the shadow is leading you to perform your life rather than live it? What if the applause you crave is only confirming your dependence? Jung believed individuation, the process of becoming whole, begins with confronting this tension. You must see how much of your life is shaped by the mask and how much energy is drained by the shadow's endless hunger. This recognition is uncomfortable. It forces you to admit how often you speak only to be admired. It reveals how many choices you make simply to avoid being unseen. Yet this discomfort is also a doorway. Once you see the trap, you can begin to step out of it. Imagine a woman who is always explaining herself. She tells her family why she made each decision, hoping they will finally understand. She tells her friends every detail of her struggles, hoping they will comfort her. Yet each explanation leaves her emptier. The persona has convinced her that being understood is proof of her value. But the shadow is the one winning, feeding on her insecurity, keeping her trapped in a cycle of need. If she could pause, she would see that true power does not come from being understood. It comes from standing firm, even when no one understands. This is the hidden cost of recognition. When your identity is built on the gaze of others, it collapses as soon as that gaze turns away. You become manipulable, predictable, and fragile. Anyone who knows your hunger can control you with crumbs of attention. The shadow does not care whether the attention is praise or criticism. It only cares that you are hooked. And so, even harsh judgment feels strangely magnetic, keeping you tied to the game of being seen. But there is another way. Jung spoke of withdrawing, projection, pulling back the energy you place on others and returning it to yourself. Instead of waiting for applause, you listen inward. Instead of performing, you practice being. This is not withdrawal from life, but a deeper engagement with it. For when you no longer chase recognition, you can finally hear the subtle voice of your own self. And that self does not beg to be seen. It simply is. Think of silence again, but in a new light. Silence is not just protection from others' misunderstanding. It is also a mirror in which you see the shadow at work. When you resist the urge to explain, you feel the anxiety rise. You feel the hunger for recognition burning in your chest. That is the shadow revealing itself. Most run from this discomfort by speaking again. But if you stay with it, if you breathe through it, you begin to separate. You realize, I am not this hunger. I am not this mask. I am something larger. This moment of recognition is rare because it requires courage. To stand without applause is to face the fear of invisibility. To resist the shadow's pull is to endure the silence that feels like emptiness. Yet here lies the paradox. Once you endure that silence, it transforms. What felt like absence becomes presence. What felt like nothing becomes the ground of your true being. Consider how this changes the way you move in the world. The woman who no longer needs to explain carries a quiet dignity. The man who no longer lives for praise carries a calm authority. Their presence unsettles those who still live for recognition, because it cannot be manipulated. It is free. Jung would say they have begun to integrate the shadow not by denying it, but by recognizing its tricks and refusing to obey. The shadow will always remain whispering for attention, pushing you to prove yourself. But integration means you no longer mistake its voice for your own. You see it, you acknowledge it, and you choose differently. The persona may still serve its purpose. We all need a mask in society, but the mask is no longer the master. It is simply a tool. And behind it, the self grows stronger, rooted in silence, nourished by inner truth. This is the heart of part 3. The trap of recognition is the shadow's feast, and the mask of persona is its favorite disguise. To live for applause is to starve the soul. To live from silence is to awaken the self. The choice is subtle, yet it shapes everything. How you speak, how you create, how you love, and how you endure. As we continue, Remember this, your shadow is not your enemy, but it is not your guide either. Its hunger will never end. The only way forward is to recognize the trap, withdraw your energy, and let the silence teach you who you really are. In the next part, we will turn to the awakening, the moment when silence stops, feeling like emptiness, and begins to reveal its gold. We ended with the trap of recognition, where the persona and the shadow keep us bound. To move forward, something deeper must awaken a new relationship with silence. Not silence as emptiness, but silence as the alchemist of transformation. This is where the journey turns from defense to creation, from fear of being unseen to the discovery of inner gold. Transformation has always been linked with mystery. The ancient alchemists worked in hidden chambers, turning base metals into something precious. Jung saw this as a powerful image of the soul. Real change does not happen in the open, under the gaze of others. It happens in quiet spaces where the unseen forces of the psyche rearrange themselves. Just as lead becomes gold in secret, a person becomes whole in solitude. Most resist this process because it does not provide instant recognition. In a world trained to value display, the work of silence feels invisible. You may be tempted to announce every step, to share every insight so that progress feels real. But this is illusion. The more you announce, the more you scatter the energy that was meant to shape you from within. Silence holds it together, allowing it to concentrate until the moment of ripening. Consider how a seed grows. It begins in darkness, buried in soil where no eye can see. If pulled out too soon, it dies. Only by remaining unseen does it gather strength to break open. The same is true of the soul. When you withhold your process from premature telling, it becomes stronger, denser, more alive. What seemed like nothing in the silence is revealed as the very foundation of growth. This is the awakening silence offers. It teaches you that your deepest transformation cannot be validated by applause or commentary. It must first be lived and only then revealed. When you stop seeking confirmation from outside, you begin to hear something else, the faint, steady voice of your own self. Jung reminded us that intuition does not shout, it whispers, and it can only be heard when the outer noise is quiet. At first, silence feels uncomfortable. The shadow stirs, urging you to explain, to share, to prove. Doubts rise, perhaps nothing is happening. Perhaps I am wasting time. Perhaps I will be forgotten. These are the tests of the alchemical chamber. To remain still, despite them, is to allow the process to continue. To break the silence is to spill the mixture before it is ready. Transformation requires trust in what cannot yet be seen. Imagine a person who has chosen this path. She resists the urge to justify herself. She does not announce every dream, nor does she defend every wound. To others, she may appear distant, even cold. Yet within something remarkable is happening. Her silence is not the absence of life. It is the crucible where her life is being reformed. When she finally emerges, the change is undeniable. Her presence carries weight that no words could have created. This is why Jung compared individuation to alchemy. It is a process of refinement, of stripping away what is false and revealing what is essential. But it cannot happen under constant exposure. The ego wants to be seen. The self needs to grow unseen. The awakening comes when you stop confusing the two. When you understand that silence is not neglect, but nourishment, you begin to embrace it as a companion. In this silence, new clarity arises. You notice the patterns of your own mind, the voices of persona and shadow, the old stories that once ruled you. Without the distraction of endless talking, you begin to discern which thoughts are truly yours and which are borrowed from the expectations of others. This is one of the greatest gifts of silence. It returns you to your own center. Yet, it is not a passive state. Silence is active, fertile, alive. Jung spoke of it as a brooding the way a bird sits upon her eggs. Nothing appears to happen, but everything depends upon it. The warmth, the stillness, the hidden energy. These are what bring forth life. In the same way, when you dwell in silence with your struggles and dreams, you allow them to incubate into wisdom. They take on a shape and strength that cannot be given by anyone else. Notice, too, how silence protects you. When you are silent, you cannot be misunderstood. When you are silent, your process cannot be twisted or mocked. The self is shielded from premature judgment, giving it room to unfold in safety. This is not about hiding forever. It is about choosing when to reveal. Just as the alchemist unveiled gold, only after the process was complete, you must learn to reveal yourself only when your transformation is ready. The awakening of silence also changes your relationship with time. Instead of rushing to be recognized, you begin to trust the slower rhythms of growth. You realize that what is ripened in silence will last, while what is rushed for display soon fades. A tree that grows quietly for years can withstand storms. A flower forced open too soon withers quickly. Your soul follows the same law. This stage of awakening also brings a shift in desire. You no longer crave recognition as you once did. Instead, you crave alignment with your own self. You crave peace, depth, and authenticity. What once felt like emptiness, the lack of applause, the lack of explanation, now feels like freedom. You discover that not being understood is not a tragedy, but a form of protection. It leaves you with the most precious gift of all, the integrity of your own journey. To live this way requires courage because the world rewards display. People will pressure you to speak, to share, to perform, but the awakening of silence gives you the strength to decline. You learn to carry your process with dignity, knowing that when the time is right, it will show itself without words. Those who need to see will see. Those who cannot will simply pass by. And neither outcome will disturb your peace. This is not about cutting yourself off. It is about learning to balance expression with protection. There are moments when words heal, when sharing creates connection. But when words are used to escape discomfort, they weaken the process. The awakening is knowing the difference. To ask, am I speaking to serve growth, or am I speaking to avoid silence? Only one of these paths leads to gold. Jung believed the soul's greatest work happens beyond the eyes of the crowd. He urged us to respect the mystery of our own unfolding, to let silence do its alchemy before rushing to speak. This is not the silence of repression, but the silence of reverence. It is the pause before the music begins, the stillness that allows the next note to carry its full power. In this way, silence teaches humility. You realize you are not in full control of your transformation. Something larger, deeper is at work. Your task is not to explain it, but to cooperate with it, to hold the vessel steady, to trust the process, to let the fire burn without interruption. This is the essence of the awakening, learning that your becoming does not depend on recognition, but on fidelity to the silent work within. When you embrace this, you find a new kind of strength, not the strength of noise or display, but the strength of depth. You can withstand misunderstanding without panic. You can carry dreams without broadcasting them. You can hold pain without performing it. And in this quiet mastery, you begin to glimpse the freedom of individuation, the ability to be whole within yourself, regardless of the world's response. This is the turning point of our journey. Silence has shifted from something to fear into something to cherish. It has revealed itself as the alchemist, the secret chamber where lead is turned into gold. In the next reflection, we will explore how this awakening leads to choice, the moment when silence becomes not only an inner state, but an outer boundary. It is here that transformation takes form as you decide what will be shared, what will be protected, and how your new strength will be lived in the world. We have walked through the fractures, the mask of the persona, the hunger of the shadow, and the awakening of silence as alchemy. Now comes the decisive step, the choice. Transformation cannot remain an idea. It must take form as a boundary. Without boundaries, the energy you have gathered in silence will leak away. With boundaries, it becomes a steady current that carries you forward. Every life reaches a moment when the individual must decide, what will I protect and what will I reveal? Jung reminded us that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Some will not understand, some will misuse, and some will envy what you share. Silence here is not retreat. It is respect for the sacred. To set a boundary is to say, this belongs to me, and it will not be handed out carelessly. Consider how many have weakened themselves by explaining to those who could not hold their truth. A woman tells her dream to someone who only laughs. A man speaks of his pain to ears that turn it into gossip. Each time this happens, the process is robbed of its dignity. Boundaries prevent this theft. They protect the sacred by keeping it in the right vessel. This does not mean isolation. It means discernment. You can choose who receives your words and when. You can choose to share only with those who honor your vulnerability with silence of their own. Jung often spoke of individuation as the path of responsibility, not only responsibility for action, but for the direction of your inner energy. Setting boundaries is part of that responsibility. Without them, you remain at the mercy of others' reactions. With them, you preserve the power of your becoming. Think of how this changes daily life. When you choose silence as a boundary, you no longer rush to justify yourself. You no longer offer explanations to those who demand them. You no longer feel the need to announce every step. Instead, you stand firm, carrying your process with dignity. The world may not understand, but you no longer depend on its understanding. This is liberation. Boundaries also shift the balance of power. Those who once controlled you with curiosity or judgment find themselves disarmed. They cannot use what you have not revealed. They cannot twist what you have kept within. By holding back, you regain the freedom to decide when and how your truth is shared. Silence becomes your shield, and from behind it, your strength grows. At first, this choice can feel harsh. You may worry that silence makes you cold, that boundaries will distance you from others. But look deeper. True closeness is not built on endless disclosure. It is built on mutual respect. When you protect your process, you are teaching others how to treat it. You are showing them that your inner life is not entertainment. It is sacred ground. Jung compared this to the image of the temple. Not every passerby is invited into the holy place. Some may admire from outside, others may approach with reverence, but only a few may step inside. Your soul is such a temple. Boundaries are the doors you guard. To leave them wide open is to risk desecration. To close them completely is to live in fear. But to open them with wisdom is to live in strength. Boundaries also reveal who truly belongs in your life. When you no longer give yourself away freely, those who only sought to consume your energy will drift away. At first, this loss may hurt, yet in time, you see it was not loss, but purification. The ones who remain are those who value you for who you are, not for what you spill out. They respect the boundary and meet you with their own. This creates relationships of depth, not performance. Notice, too, how boundaries change your relationship with yourself. Each time you resist the urge to explain, you affirm your own worth. Each time you choose silence instead of premature telling you, strengthen your trust in your own process. You begin to feel a stability that does not depend on the gaze of others. This is not arrogance. It is self-respect. It is the recognition that your life is not a stage, but a sacred unfolding. Boundaries are not only about what you withhold, but also about what you allow. You can choose to express yourself when the moment is right, when the listener is worthy, when the process has ripened. In those moments, your words carry a weight they never had before. They are not scattered, but concentrated. They do not beg for understanding. They embody it. This is the paradox. By speaking less, your words gain more power. The choice to protect the sacred is also a turning point in individuation. Up until now, silence may have felt like survival, but now it becomes agency. You are no longer simply avoiding harm. You are actively shaping your life. The shadow may whisper, urging you to seek recognition. The persona may resist longing to perform, but you have tasted the strength of silence, and now you use it deliberately. This is transformation in action. Think again of alchemy. The fire in the vessel must be controlled, neither too strong nor too weak. Boundaries are the vessel walls. Without them, the fire burns wildly and destroys. With them, it purifies and refines. Your silence as boundary is the same. It contains the energy of your process until it is ready to reveal its gold. This is also where clarity begins to shine. You notice who drains you and who nourishes you. You notice when words are needed and when they would only scatter your focus. You notice the subtle difference between speaking to heal and speaking to escape discomfort. This clarity is not given from outside, it arises from the boundary itself. The more you practice silence, the more you discern what truly matters. And here lies a deeper truth. Boundaries are not only external, they are also internal. You must learn to guard your own thoughts, not letting them wander into endless rehearsal of explanations. You must resist the inner compulsion to justify yourself, even in imagination. This inner discipline is just as important as the outer silence. Without it, the shadow finds ways to keep you bound. With it, you learn to rest in your own presence. This stage of the journey is both liberating and demanding. It asks you to be selective, to say no to disappoint those who expect constant access to your life. But each time you honor the boundary, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Each time you choose silence over scattering, you feel stronger, more focused, more whole. Jung believed that individuation requires precisely this: the courage to disappoint the world in order to remain true to the self. The choice to protect what is sacred is not selfishness, it is wisdom. For only by honoring your own depths can you bring something authentic into the light. As we close this reflection, see where in your life boundaries are needed. Ask yourself, which part of me deserves protection? Which dream, which wound, which new beginning needs silence instead of words? The answers will not come from others. They will rise within you quietly but unmistakably. And when you honor them, you step firmly into your transformation. This is the power of choice. This is the boundary that turns silence into strength. In the final part, we will move into integration, the moment when silence becomes not only a boundary, but a way of life. It is here that individuation reaches its resolution, and the lesson of the soul becomes clear. Every journey of transformation must come to rest, and ours ends here, with silence not as burden, but as freedom. We began with the fracture of over-explaining past through the shadow of recognition, and discovered silence as alchemy. Now we see the fruit of that path, a life lived from inner strength, guarded by stillness, free from the endless demand to be understood. The truth is simple. What you keep within does not make you weaker. It makes you whole. The modern world tells you to narrate every step, to perform each moment for the gaze of others. But Jung reminds us, individuation, the birth of the true self, happens in secret. What grows in silence becomes strong enough to stand without defense. Silence, when chosen wisely, becomes a shield. It guards what is sacred from careless eyes. It prevents others from twisting your wounds into stories that were never theirs to tell. It shelters the seed of your becoming until it is ready to bloom. In this way, silence is not emptiness. It is sacred ground alive with unseen growth. Those who learn to live in this guarded stillness no longer beg for recognition. They do not crumble when misunderstood. They walk steadily because their worth is no longer tied to the applause or silence of others. This is freedom. Not the freedom to say everything, but the freedom to no longer need to. Think of how different life becomes when you no longer scatter yourself through endless explanations. Conversations change, relationships deepen. You find yourself drawn only to those who honor your boundaries, who do not demand constant access to your soul. And you discover peace in the quiet, a peace that cannot be bought, imitated, or taken away. This is the integration Jung spoke of, where the shadow and persona no longer rule unchecked. The shadow's hunger for recognition may still whisper, but it no longer controls. The persona may still wear its mask in public, but it is no longer mistaken for the self. Silence has revealed the difference. Silence has made you whole enough to choose. And so the lesson is clear: silence, when lived with wisdom, is not isolation, but maturity. It does not hide your truth. It protects, it nurtures it, and prepares it to be lived rather than explained. In this stillness, you discover that you no longer need to be understood by all, because you have finally understood yourself. Jung once said that man is divided between what he shows and what he hides, and balance is found only when both are reconciled. Guarded silence is that reconciliation. It allows you to show what is ready while protecting what is still in formation. It honors both the seen and unseen within you. As we close, let this truth rest in your heart. Not everything needs to be spoken to be real. Some things grow stronger by being held in the quiet. Some wounds heal faster when not reopened by explanation. Some dreams rise higher when they are nurtured in secret. Silence gives them space to breathe, and in that breathing, you find yourself reborn. So now, as the journey of reflection ends, ask yourself gently, which parts of my life need fewer words and more silence? Which dreams deserve protection rather than performance? Which wounds need stillness rather than storytelling? The answers will come quietly in the language of your own soul. When they do, honor them. For silence is not a cage, but a temple. It is the place where you meet yourself without disguise, where you hear the voice that whispers rather than shouts, where you walk, not half alive, but whole. And remember, those who learn to carry themselves in silence never truly disappear. They become visible in a new way, not through words, but through presence. They shine not by demanding attention, but by radiating a strength that needs no explanation. If this reflection has touched you, take a moment to let it settle. And if you feel moved, share in the comments which part spoke most deeply to your own life. Your words may help another who is quietly seeking the same truth. For now, rest in the stillness. Trust what it is shaping within you, and carry with you this final thought. Silence is not the absence of meaning, but the fertile soil from which your true self emerges.